Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Southern Outdoorsman Podcast. Today we're talking about what I'm going to call the Mississippi Monster, just a gigantic deer that Mr. Chase Borries killed. Chase, how are you doing?
I'm doing good. How are y'all?
I'm doing excellent. I'm happy to be talking about the great state of Mississippi. Yep. We've had a lot of Georgia listener success stories for some reason. I told you the other day, Chase, that we recorded these in batches, and the last batch we recorded 4 back-to-back, and they were all Georgia guys, and I didn't realize it until we got to like the third one. I'm like, and this guy's also from Georgia. I'm like, we need to diversify a little bit. Jacob, how are you?
I'm doing good. Still not, like I said, with most of these listener success stories, I'm not doing nearly as good as Chase's because Chase killed a giant.
You got to come up with a new line.
That's all I've got.
You said it on every single one.
I know, but it's almost like, look, it's behind his head. For all the YouTube viewers, you can look behind his head. That's it, hang on the wall facing him. This is a gigantic deer, public land Mississippi monster. So, Chase, again, I got a little FOMO over here, a little fear of missing out on some giant deer. So I want to kind of get into this real quick, Chase, with you on specifically, you mentioned earlier before we got started, you're a long-time listener, but when did you think, like, what year do you think you really started listening to the podcast, and what got you to start listening to the show?
So it's kind of a funny, quick story. I'll try to keep it as quick as I can. We went up to vacation. It was Thanksgiving. We went to vacation to Gatlinburg, and my little girl, this is 2018. We went vacation to Gatlinburg. She was 1 year old at the time. We made the mistake of the 10-hour drive, during the day of bringing a 1-year-old, trying to keep her strapped in that long. And it was a nightmare, and, screaming the whole way and this and that. And so it was like the day before we were supposed to leave, it was about 9:00 at night. And I told my wife, I said, you know what? I was like, we could battle with this tomorrow, or, I could pound a couple of Red Bulls and we could leave right now. And she could sleep. Y'all could both sleep the whole way through. So that's what I did. And so we got on the road, and I was like, man, I've been looking for some good podcasts, some good hunting podcasts, and just started searching, through Spotify and seeing y'all's podcast. So I just clicked on it, started listening, and man, I don't know, it was something that got me about y'all's podcast, the information, the way I did the interviews. It was like, man, I love this podcast. So I've just been a pretty hardcore listener ever since.
Dude, long time, ride or die, baby. 2018.
Let's go.
There's some episodes back there. There's a couple good ones. A lot of them are rough. The audio's rough, real rough. So,
hey, I can relate with the screaming 1-year-old. We're at the 1.5-year-old mark right now, in the middle of teething. So we're having a great time. I can relate. I know the feeling right there. You're just like, you know what? Yeah, I'd rather drive for 6 hours in the middle of the night than deal with all this. So.
I don't know. We're going to get some parenting advice. I have no advice because I don't have kids. My mom, I always feel like she'd pop us like half a Benadryl or something like that.
Yeah, just let you have a little nip of bourbon.
Yeah, just, put it right on to sleep. Just, self-medicated, whatever, put them down. Not like full-blown tranquilizer, but, you put them down for a little bit and you just keep on driving.
Okay. Do what you got to do, brother.
Yeah, you got to do what you got to do, them youngins. All right, let's start talking about this deer.
Well, hold on. Before we talk about the deer,
okay,
I got some other follow-up questions. See, you say stuff like that, and it's like, just Andrew gets, just all messed up in the head. He can't focus. So, real quick, Chase, kind of getting back to the story here. Been listening since 2018, so a long-time listener here. Has there been any specific, you've listened for so long. You probably started listening around, like, episode, like, probably 40 or 50, if depending on what time of the year it was.
2018.
When you started listening, but has there been any specific either podcast guests or just topics that you've enjoyed from the podcast, that whether it's just something you found interesting or something that's actually kind of helped you out, like, over the last few years?
Yeah, as far as the guests, man, I've got a list of them here because I was like, man, I can't leave any of these guys out because there's been so many that's just been, learned a lot from, whether it's a little bit here, a little bit there, mostly the Delta guys. And obviously, me hunting bottomland Delta, any of the guys you have on there from the Delta, I'll listen to. But some of the older guys, Tony Myers, Warren Womack, Robert Carter, Richard Fott, the Jonathan Moreland, those are all great. But, and the list goes on. I could... Wes Moe, Josh Driver, Troy Pottinger, Jeff Oman. I've got so many here, and that's not even all of them. But and it's hard for me to remember exactly what lessons and what tips I learned from which guys, but there's been so many things. But I can honestly say a lot of the biggest thing that I guess I've really captured from a lot of it was thermals has been kind of an eye opener listening to you guys, hearing the guys talk about thermals. And, I hear all the guys talk about, well, thermals doesn't really matter in bottomland, and they don't as much as, hill country, but, it's kind of like a micro and a macro type thing. The thermals, I've learned from them, listening to them, the thermals, they're not as abrupt or pronounced as they are in the hills. But that's not to say that the deer doesn't still use them, and they absolutely do. It's just on a smaller scale, and it's harder to notice. But that's been a really big thing for me. Feed trees, I've learned a lot from your guests from the feed trees. How to find them, what time of the year, and identifying things like that. That's been a big help as well.
Awesome. Well, I'll say this because we're recording this probably a couple of weeks before this episode comes out.
Yeah.
But by the time this episode comes out, you said you like guys talking about like the Delta and that area of the country. We've got a good one that by the time this episode comes out, his episode's already been out with Lance Smathers. It's been 4 years since it's been on the podcast. An absolute killer, killing early season bucks down there with a bow on public. And anyways, it's one that, by the time this episode comes out, the viewers, listeners, you can already go back and re-listen to that episode.
That'll be episode 610.
Episode 610. Go listen to that with, or watch it with Lance Smathers. But definitely, Chase, keep an eye out for when that comes out next Monday. Because again, we're recording this a little ahead of time. It's a good one. It's a real good one.
Yeah, it's really good.
So, but no, so that's really interesting. Again, there's been like a bunch of guys. And the one thing I really liked about what you mentioned quite a few guys that have nothing to do necessarily with where they hunt that relates directly to where you're hunting, okay? But
Right.
I'm sure they had something, whether it was some small tidbit, some kind of piece of information that maybe was impactful for you. Yeah, they may not be hunting the same habitat. And like Troy is probably like 900 miles from me, almost 1,000 miles from me.
Hunting northern Idaho.
Actually, no, probably like 1,300 miles from where you
I was
live.
about to say a lot further than 900.
But like he's probably 1,300 miles from me, but he's a whitetail killer that has very specific strategies that I think can translate across the country. So
Sure.
I'm really excited that you mentioned guys again outside of that river bottom hunting that you still found some valuable information, because that's why I always tell listeners, like, man, there's always something. Like you might listen to a whole interview, an hour-long interview, and there might be 2% of that you find impactful, but that 2% might change your perspective moving forward into the season and kind of compound your knowledge. So when you run into a certain situation, like, oh man, you can revert back to, oh man, I heard how, whoever, name it, guest, did this one thing in this kind of situation. Let me try to apply that and see if I can have some success, and you can have success that way. So it's really interesting you brought some of those guys up that are outside that habitat and terrain that you hunt.
Yeah, I mean, it really is, and that's kind of the biggest take I've got from it is, it might not be in your area, might not be the same habitat, but like you said, there's maybe just only 2% of that podcast that you'll hear something, you'll say, "Huh, I never knew that," or "Hey, I need to try to apply that. I've never thought about it that way." And that's just thinking out the box in that way. I think is how you learn.
Well, before we get to the story on this deer, you mentioned one other thing earlier before we get recording, which is the amount of knowledge that not only me and Andrew can consume by interviewing people, but also the listeners can consume compared to maybe in the past. I mean, you have the opportunity to learn, decades of experience and knowledge from something like this that, hopefully can speed listeners and ourselves, being me and Andrew, speed us along a little bit further in our, I don't like saying hunting career, but like just our experience level, our woodsmanship level, to hopefully get us to a point of, you're still making failures, but you're understanding a little bit quicker how to get out of that failures and get back into having success by doing so.
Sure. And one thing I didn't mention, was talking about the thermals, a big thing I took. Another thing that really, and this relates to the story of me killing this buck, was, hunting from the ground, bow hunting from the ground specifically, still hunting, with a rifle. That's something we've done, we've all done quite a bit, but bow hunting from the ground was something that was just so far, why would I do it? It just didn't make sense. And I started hunting in areas, and I started realizing that I wouldn't hunt an area because there was nowhere to get in a tree, or, it was hard to, and I started realizing I was hindering myself by doing that. And, and I actually dedicated, believe it or not, I basically dedicated an entire season, 3 or 4 seasons ago of hunting from the ground and some just nasty thick stuff, several acres, just some nasty, what we call CR, our CRP here, it's planted oaks. And it just has this nasty vine that grows up in it. They're 30-year-old type oaks that, you stand up in them, you can't see. You got to have to duck down, and you could just see a couple feet between the vines and the bottom of the limbs, through there. And there was good deer in there that particular year, and I was, hindering myself by not hunting. And I've decided that, what, I'm gonna try to, I wouldn't say master it, but get better at it. And as bad as I hated that year, and it was just, not sitting in the big woods, not seeing the beauty, of the big woods, and the mature, what we call the big woods, mature hardwood forest. It was daunting to just sit in these thickets all day. But, it was something I did and I got better at. And if I wouldn't have done that, I wouldn't have killed this deer. I mean, it's a fact.
Okay,
You got Jacob fired up.
because what you're saying is exactly what Lance Smathers does. That episode
Sure.
610, he's hunting off the ground with a bow, having a lot of success doing so on public down there in that part of Mississippi. So very interesting. Also, you just mentioned one thing before we get into the story. I got to ask you this. Talk about those planted oaks. Like that's like a habitat type in a lot of different river bottoms I've hunted in the southeast. You find that where they've reclaimed. Typically, it's like an old field. They reclaim it into some kind of oak species, red oaks. A lot of times in some areas, it's like water oaks. In areas I've seen different places, but a lot of red oaks. They plant them in rows, and it just kind of grows up. And
Right.
they take away that old CRP, old field habitat, and turn it back into oaks. But it stays very brushy, like what you're talking about, where you can't actually really get in a tree. If you get in a tree, like you got to shoot almost underneath you, and you can't get very high.
Right.
So, what have you learned? How do deer use that in your experience? Is it just like one of those areas that's like more unhuntable, so like they feel more confident in that kind of environment, or what have you noticed in that kind of habitat?
I think they use that habitat, like you said, for a safety. That they're in there. Any deer, it don't matter where you go. The thicker it is, the more safe they feel, whether it's briar thickets or CRP or whatever it is. But I think that they use it, as a safety. But I mean, it also depends on, I found that wherever the oaks are dropping that year, some years the acorns are not dropping in the CRP. Some years they are. If they're not dropping in there, I've seen it like a desert in there. You couldn't really, find much deer to hunt in there. But, they'd be more in the big woods. But some years, when they do drop in there, it's just usually on fire, and again, anytime you get some thicker stuff, and you'll have thicker stuff inside of that than the rest of it, and they use it the same way. Instead of the thin thickets you have in the big woods, where it's just like the understory type trees, it's the same way in there. You have this thicker stuff that they'll typically like to travel down. They like to lay up in and bed in, things like that.
Yeah, that reminds me of a couple spots I hunted in Tennessee like that, where it was. I mean, those planted oaks. I don't know how old they were. They were probably maybe 20 feet tall, but they're packed in there pretty tight. Like you could walk down the roads, but you're like dodging limbs, and you'd find scrapes everywhere. But dude, the understory was so thick. Like you get in a little patch, you could maybe see 30, 40 yards. But like if you got into the next row, you might not be able like just walk through it because it's too thick. Like let alone see through it.
Right.
And so that's a really interesting habitat type that is very specific, at least in my experience. I'm kind of speaking for Andrew too, maybe in his experience too, that you find specifically in a lot of river bottoms where they do reclaim these old fields. So that's really interesting. So again, ground hunting's been a big factor for you. I don't know if you had on the list Travis Murray from Mississippi, because I know he was like one of the first guys we talked about
Yes.
ground hunting with a bow and killed a lot of big deer doing so. And he's one of those guys I look at. I'm like, he's been doing that for like 20 something years and killing a ton of deer. And it's like, man, maybe more of us ought to take notes on that after episode 600 with Todd Stakely doing it with a ghillie suit.
Well, and Travis too, like hunting with a traditional bow, and he even made one of the more interesting things he said in that episode was that he didn't really view it as a detriment anymore. He's like, this is just how I hunt. Like I almost look at it as an advantage now because this is how I get to hunt and I can shoot fast and I can get in these weird spots and just hearing that perspective for me was really interesting. And then like
Yeah,
Todd,
and
like you
that's
said, man, like Todd, I want to implement it more because what you did is what I need to do. I need to just do it and get more comfortable with it because I haven't really tried it yet.
yeah, it's a mental thing. It really is. It's a big mental thing that I'm not going to say I'm 100%. I still would rather be in a stand. Don't get me wrong, but it was at first. It was like, man, I feel like I'm wasting my time. Like, what am I doing? It doesn't feel natural with a bow. It didn't for me anyway. It didn't feel natural with a bow in my hand to be sitting on the ground. I was like, man, I don't know what I'm doing. And the more I did it, the more comfortable I got with it, uh, to the point where, I mean, again, if I could get in the stand, I will. But if the opportunity presents itself and, I see the opportunity there on the ground and it's where I think I need to be, I'm comfortable enough with it now that that's where I'm going to get.
So I just because we're on this topic, and I think some people may find it interesting. Again, the ground hunting, bow hunting. Again, how it played a factor for you killing this buck. When that year when you started implementing ground hunting, and it was a struggle. What were some of your biggest mistakes early on that maybe you made that you then kind of worked out? And if we could talk about that, that'd be great for people to maybe kind of circumnavigate some of those mistakes and kind of maybe start off on a better foot. Because again, me and Andrew are both trying to implement this fall.
Sure. Yeah. I think the biggest thing for me was probably getting in there and then thinking I need to make this, bulletproof blind and drag, whether it was, I never really messed with the pop up blinds too much. My dad hunts with me quite a bit. He's older, 70 years old. So, I mean, he was stuck on, oh, we need to put a pop up blind there. We tried that. Didn't work. I knew it wouldn't, but, but, at first I was going in there and just dragging up these big limbs and like trying to conceal myself. Like, and what I found out was the more you go in there and the more stuff you drag around and move around, the more scent you're putting down. And it's just the more you're stirring everything up. And I noticed every time I did that, deer would walk up and they would just, pick me out immediately, or they would just walk up and know something wasn't right and they would dart out. And I started realizing you just got to kind of, look at the area where you want to maybe get and look at it from afar, 100 yards or however far you can see from it, and see, where's the most concealed spot, and just kind of tuck up into a tree, maybe a fallen limb. Don't move a lot of stuff around. Just kind of tuck back in there, do the best you can, and treat it like you're turkey hunting. I mean, just be really still and have your bow ready at all times. I mean, you gotta. It's very daunting because I mean, I sit there. Sometimes I use a stool. Sometimes I'll sit on the ground. Sometimes I'll sit on my knees. But I learned that just sitting there, where I could have my bow sitting in between my knees with my hand basically ready to just grab my bow, and I could, clip up with my other hand where there's not a lot of movement and kind of come up and draw in one motion. And the less movement you make, that was seemed to be the most productive way to doing it. But to try to drag up a bunch of limbs and conceal yourself with a big natural blind, it honestly it didn't seem to help a lot with me. I think just kind of getting in there and looking natural. I mean, ghillie suits, I think, or leafy suits or things like that, I think is a great idea for that kind of stuff. Wear a mask.
That's what
I know you. I mean, I know we're fighting over questions here. I know you want to talk, but I'm about to let you go. I just want to make the point though that you said something really interesting there, which is like when we're turkey hunting, I'm like perfectly fine slinking up against a big tree in the wide open and just sitting there.
Right.
And a turkey has way better eyesight than a deer does. So it's like, why am I, so nervous to do it when it comes to deer? Like, why am I so non-confident doing that when it comes to deer hunting? That's kind of just an interesting point.
because not all deer have the same antlers. Turkey's a turkey. I can't tell the difference, so I shoot them typically.
Well,
So I see that at 140, 150 comes by, which hasn't happened in Alabama, but clearly in Mississippi in some areas you can kill deer like that. Versus, a 1-year-old spike buck, I'm like, oh, it's not that big a deal with the spike buck, but that big deer comes by, I'm like, oh, I'm real nervous now. Like, different situation.
Yeah.
But it goes into camouflage. That was one thing I wanted to ask you just real quick. What have you learned camouflage wise? Like, are you just wearing slick camo? Or are you wearing a leafy suit? Or are you wearing a ghillie suit? Like, what's your thoughts now after doing it for a little bit?
I have a leafy suit. I've never tried the full-on ghillie suit just because the weight and it kind of shooting a bow. Not to say it wouldn't work. I know a lot of guys use them, but I do have a leafy suit that if I'm on the ground, I'm going to have that leafy suit on. I'm going to have a mask on, gloves. Anything that just so you don't flash. Try to cover your eyes. I mean, it's hard to wear a mask all day, but that's just something you have to do. Again, I just treat it like, I'm not a huge turkey hunter, but I grew up in a family of big turkey hunters, so I've done quite a bit, and I just kind of look at it like I would turkey hunting. But yeah, as far as camo goes, I mean, I'm a big bottomland guy, so hunting bottomland, so it works. But I wear a leafy suit as well, and obviously scent, like you were saying, you don't know why, but it doesn't feel right sitting in the wide open when you're deer hunting, but you'll do it turkey hunting, and that's exactly right. I mean, at the end of the day, the deer's moving around by his nose. I mean, that's what he's doing. So,
Sweet.
Mm-hmm.
Well, let's kind of get over to the story of this buck. And I know you got another that John 8 point behind you too, which is a freak of a deer.
Distracting.
Very distracting. But the deer you shot last year, first off, did you ever put a tape to that deer?
I did. Me and my cousin, he used to be a official scorer. He actually passed away last year. He had a hunting show. He had quite a bit of stuff. But anyways, he actually helped me score it, and it came out 162 and 5/8. I believe is what it was.
Wow.
Is what it grossed. I think it was 150.
No, keep you can keep the net.
Oh, did we lose you? Oh, he probably got a call or something.
Okay, there we go. Sorry.
No, you're good.
Yeah, I was trying to delete a call there.
Yeah, no, you're good. No, I was gonna say you can keep the net. I don't care about the net score. That's why I'm a pro Buckmasters guy when it comes to scoring because it is
Nets are for fish.
yeah. I'm like I get the whole thing, but if he's got antler on his head, it should count.
Yep.
The whole symmetrical thing just throws me off, like with Boone and Crockett, Pope and Young, and all that stuff. But still, killed your giant Pope and Young buck no matter what. And then also just an absolute hammer. So getting into the story, I'd love to talk about first off. I know Mississippi's kind of interesting on public lands. About some public you can run cameras on, some you can't. But did you have any kind of past experience with this deer at all, whether it's through trail cameras or visual observations?
Where we're hunting over there, you can't run trail cameras. So naturally, I didn't have any past experience with this deer. I'd had some experience. I mean, I'd hunted that area before, and I was actually hunting some other bucks in there, some really good bucks. And I kind of narrowed it down to where these bucks were going and where the deer were moving in general. And it just so happened it was my day to see him.
Okay. So kind of going into, I guess, a little bit of the more backstory with this deer or like with this specific hunt. Can you talk to us? Like, I mean, again, we don't have to be overly descriptive because I don't want to spot burn any of your areas, but like habitat wise, what is one of those things that I guess you've had success with habitat wise over there? And is there any kind of like, I guess, pattern to this buck of like areas that you like to, I guess, focus on in a river bottom setting? Because again, we got a lot of listeners that hunt river bottoms all across the Southeast. Some are very similar to others. Some are completely different. But like, what is your thought process down there when it comes to like the habitat and again, finding these areas that like with that buck that he was spending some time in and again, gave you an opportunity to be able to kill him?
So basically, I mean, river bottom, you got big, open, beautiful woods. And like you've heard a lot of your guests say time and time again, you're sitting where it's the most beautiful and the prettiest woods. You're probably not going to see any, good bucks. I mean, they're just smarter than that, especially on the public land. Anywhere's thick, anywhere's where they could get in, where they could hide, that's where they're going to be. Whether that's, the thick CRP like we're talking about, palmetto ridges, that's a lot of what I key in on. The edges of those sometimes directly in the middle, but a lot of times a good starting point I would say would be working the outer edges of those thicker areas and learning the lay of the land and where the edges of those thickets are, and then keying in on that.
So walk us through, I guess, the story of this hunt of this buck. I mean, again, not necessarily knowing he was in there, but you're hunting some other bucks. Kind of walk us through the situation, the scenario, and kind of how the hunt played out.
So I guess it kind of started the season before. Like I said, I'd been hunting some good bucks in the area. I'd kind of stomped the entire area out. I knew exactly what was what. I knew the lay of the land, so to speak. And I kind of figured out how these deer were traveling. And I had it narrowed down to a spot where I wanted to go the previous season, and I never really got there. And I say a spot where I wanted to go. This is only a couple 100 yards from where I'd been hunting all year. I just never really went into push further out, So fast forward, after that season, I still had this spot, kind of, I guess, on my mind. And I knew they were kind of funneling through this area. Kind of give a description of the area. It was, I guess about a quarter mile or so, you had some of the thicker CRP, and then they were moving from the CRP into the big woods and, using these palmetto thickets, as cover to travel through. They're basically using the thick stuff as corridors. And And so with that in mind, the next year was coming up. We went and scouted. Me and my dad walked around. Again, we didn't go in that spot because I didn't really want to go bust anything out. This was probably a month before the season started. And I found more evidence that, they were traveling through there. We actually seen a bunch of bucks in velvet when we were walking around. They came through that area, walked right by us. I found just a huge scrape in there. And I'm pretty sure that was probably from this buck, as big as it was. And it's just tore up as it was. He had a big scrape, then he had a couple of rubs there. So I kind of knew about which way he was traveling, say, from an east to west type pattern. Nothing more than that. And so fast forward, opening morning the next, that season, I had it on my mind that, this is where, I told my dad, I was like, this is where we're going to go. My dad, he's 70 years old. He still hangs in there with me. He'll walk miles through the woods with me, man. He's a good hunting buddy to have. But anyway, the night before, he's asthmatic and blood clots, and just like any other older man when they get older. The night before opening day, he realized he forgot his medicine at home, and I hunt, 3.5 hours from home is where we hunt. So wouldn't really like just run back to the house, and he was aggravated and upset, and I was like, that ain't no big deal. I'm not really that worried about getting in there early. It's opening morning. Everybody's going to be there. It's, we got all season. Say, no, I want you to go. I want you to go. And I realized then that, he was going to be more upset with me if I didn't go. He'd be more upset with himself and me if I didn't go. And said, well, I said, tell you what, I said, I'm not even going to bring my stand in there. So, cause I haven't really, haven't went to this exact spot. So I said, I'm just going to go in there, look around. My thoughts were, kind of look for us a spot to get. And I said, as soon as the pharmacy opens up in local town there, I said, we'll get your medicine called in. I'll come out early, 10 o'clock, and come get you. We'll run up there, get your medicine. We'll jump back in the woods, no harm, no foul. So anyway, so that was kind of the plan. I got in the woods, ended up getting in kind of late, open in the morning, nothing's together like I wanted to be. And I get to the access point there, where everybody parks at, and there was already like 4 or 5 ATVs there. And I was like, man, this is, like I didn't even really want to go there at that point because I was like, man, everybody's already in the woods. I don't want to bust anybody. But I knew where I wanted to get. And so I said, I'm just going to slip in, just do some slip hunting, see if I could kind of slip past everybody without busting them, messing their hunts up. And if I could get to this one area, then I know I'd have it to myself because you had to cross a slough. I know nobody else is kind of willing to cross. It was kind of dry that year. So I said, well, I could walk in some knee deep mud, get across the slough. And once I get over on the other side, I'll kind of have it to myself. So that's what I did. I slipped in there real easy, just kind of slip hunting my way in. And I got in there and I got to the spot where I wanted to go. And, it typically goes, wherever you drop your pin, you get there, you might end up a half mile from there. You might end up a couple hundred yards from there. Where you usually don't get is exactly where your pin was. And but anyway, I got to that spot and it was exactly what I figured. And I seen where the deer had been traveling through there pretty good. I seen where it bottlenecked up and it was a funnel in the palmettos. And it's like, man, this is exactly what I was thinking it was going to be. And I remember looking to the left and there was just this palmetto bush there that made this perfect circle. And there was like this, 4-foot diameter circle in the middle of this palmetto it was clear. I was like, man, that's like a good natural blind right there. So I just, pushed the palmettos aside, sat in there, just had a little ground pad and I just got in the middle of them, cleared the leaves away and just sat down. And it was a good, easy, probably 5-mile-an-hour north wind that morning. It was really cool. It was unusually cool that year. It was like 45 degrees that morning on opening morning. But so anyways, I'll sit there and, I'm not really thinking too much about, I'm not hot on anything, I don't think I'm about to, not thinking I'm about to see a deer, or whatever, I'm just kind of scouting it out, observation sit more than anything. And so I'm sitting there, I guess it was about an hour. And, I heard some squirrels fussing and I was actually standing up in these palmettos. The palmettos were tall enough. They were kind of like, up to nose high. And So I'd kneel down for a little bit and I'd stand up and I could kind of look over this palmetto ridge. And I'd heard some squirrels fussing kind of back in the area, and I was watching those or listening for those. And I kind of determined, like, I was like, they must be fussing at each other, after how it is, you sit there and stare for 10, 15 minutes. I was like, they're just probably fussing at each other. So I actually turned 180 degrees, was looking the other way. And I remember setting my bow down at my feet, and I was like, oh, well, let me set my bow this way, the way I was facing, so just in case something slips behind me. And I didn't have my bow stand or nothing, so I'm just laying it on the ground. And so, I mean, it was probably 10 minutes I was sitting there looking the other way, and I don't really remember. I guess obviously I just heard something behind me. And so when I turned and looked, he's like, the deer's literally walking like 8 yards behind me. And I noticed, like, I seen him, and I immediately knew it was a buck, just the size of his body. And if I could have redone this 100 times, I probably would have botched it 100 times. I don't know why. I just immediately hit my knees. I didn't even try to look because his head was going right behind a tree when he came by. When I turned around and looked, his head was going behind a huge oak tree in between us. And so I just immediately hit my knees and grabbed my bow and never looked up. And I was looking to clip up. And as soon as I clipped up, I started to draw back without even looking. And I get just dead half draw, like in a bind. And his head passes the tree and he just checks me and looks straight at me. And I didn't have time to pull my mask up or nothing. So I'm just like in half draw, sitting there, and he's looking at me. And I'm like, well, this is over with, I'm like, I'm done. And he kind of looks at me and he kind of he just turns his head and keeps walking. And I'm like, man, I don't understand how, what's going on here. So as soon as he keeps walking, I come to full draw. And when I came to full draw, he checks me again. And when he checked me the second time, he caught the very end of me coming to full draw. And he was so close. I remember seeing, he looked straight at me, and then I could see him look up at the top cam of my bow, like at the end of my movement when I came to full draw. And he looked at the top cam of the bow. And I'm thinking, well, it's for sure over with now. And, it was God's blessing, just at that moment, a squirrel above me just started just rattling off. And, it's almost like, I know it sounds crazy and it's just one of these, stories you hear that, but it was like I could almost see what the deer was thinking, because he kind of looks up in the tree, and it's like I really think he dismissed it to it just being a squirrel that knocked something out the tree, maybe. I don't know. But he, at that point, he was acting really nervous because he was downwind of me. And I think he knew something was wrong, and he knew somebody was there, because there's no doubt he was inside my bubble, but he just didn't know which way to dart off yet. And so he looks at me, checks me the second time, and, I'm thinking it's over with. And he kind of takes a better look that time. He gives me a couple of head bobs. And for whatever reason, the squirrel starts rattling off. He kind of looks, and then he just turns and keeps walking again. And so at this point, I'm trying everything I could to get on him, and I'm thinking about, like, how am I going to shoot this deer? There's just palmettos all in front of me. And he's starting to quarter away from me at this point, and he's about 10 yards out. The closest he got to me walking by was about 6 yards. And then at this point, he's at about 10 yards, and he's quartering away. And there was one little hole I could shoot through. And it wasn't ideal by no means. And I just remember thinking, man, this opportunity's it's slipping away fast. Like, you better do something. And so I just put it as tight as I could on him, and I let it fly. And as soon as I shot, it was one of those things I just went, oh man, that was far back. Well, I felt it. And he buckles, turns 180 degrees around, and starts running back, straight back past me the way he came. And so I'm standing up, and I never really got a good look at him because all the excitement. Then once I shot, it was like a bomb went off. And, and he turns around and starts running off. And I knew he was big, but I never really looked at the horns, to be honest with you, because at this point he's running off, and I'm looking at the arrow. My arrow's hanging out of him, and it's on the opposite side, because he turned around and ran the other way. So I'm trying to figure out why, if the shot was far back, why is an arrow hanging out of him? It should have went right through his stomach. And so I never really looked at the horns. I watch him run off, and as far as I could hear, he's running. And and I never heard him crash. So I immediately felt like that gut wrenching feeling, like, man, that was terrible. It kind of took the wind out of my sails, and so I sat down for a minute. First person I called my dad. I was like, I just shot a stud. I was like, I just shot a stud. He's like, what do you mean a stud? I was like, look, I'm gonna tell you right now. Conservatively, he was high 140. So I was like, but I think I'm being pretty conservative. And he's like, really? And then at that point, that's when like all the emotions hit, the buck fever hit, and I just start trembling. And, I was like, I got to let you go. I can't even talk on the phone. So, the deer, he runs off. And, after that, I just kind of sat there. I know, bow hunt, you typically just don't, you wait several hours. I know a lot of people do, but I heard how far this deer ran, and I knew he was several hundred yards. And I had a good feeling he didn't, crash. So I started looking around for blood, and I look and I look and I look, and I just can't find anything. I ended up calling a buddy of mine, told him, he came over there. Another buddy of mine, they started helping me look for blood. And I mean, we looked for like an hour. And finally, my buddy, he's like 70 yards out in these palmettos. And I'm like, what is he even doing out there? Like, it's so thick, he's not going to, And he hollered, I found blood. I was like, you got to be kidding me. So we would go out there, and sure enough, it was, just little bit of blood, half the size of your pinky nail. And I was like, oh man, this isn't good. It looked like clean muscle blood to me. And so we start tracking. We find a little bit of blood here and a little bit of blood there, a little bit of blood here. 150, 200 yards later, I found a spot where he had crossed a log, and I could see a bloody hoof print that drug across that log. And knowing that I didn't hit him square in the shoulder, I felt like it was a back, too far back shot. I told him then, I said, man, believe it or not, I think I shot this deer, and I think I shot him in the butt. And I was like, nah, man, there's no way, like, that close. He's the worst shot in the world if you shot him, hit him in the butt from 10 yards. I'm telling you, I was like, he's quartered away hard. I felt like it was far back. I think I hit him in the hind quarter somewhere. The arrow was hanging out. So at that point, I said, man, we need to we need to back out. We need to call some dogs, there's no point in, molesting this track up anymore. So that's what we did. We backed out, and I think I shot him at like 8:57 in the morning. So anyways, we back out and got on our local Facebook, blood trackers, and they ended up hooking me up with a guy that's just like, he's one of the, if not the best in the country. I mean, he's really one of the best in the country. His name's Ben Ward. He does a lot of tracking. I mean, the guy's been on Primos. He's done a lot of stuff. I mean, and he's just a really, really good. He's got some of the best dogs there are. And so they told me I was getting him, and I was like, oh wow, well, at least I'm getting him. But at that point, I determined I'd shot him in the hind quarter, and I was like, man, I felt terrible. Like, I felt like, maybe I shouldn't have took the shot. Like, second guessing myself. I didn't think I'd ever find the deer. I said, well, I probably won't find him, but at least I got some good dogs. So anyway, I had to sit all day, because we can't go in this particular public land. We can't go into track till after dark, till after it's closed. So I sit there all day, second guessing, wondering, and ended up meeting up with a guy at like 9:30, 10 o'clock at night. And, he told me, he's like, look, the later the better. As dry as it is, the more dew that gets on the ground. I'm like, yeah. So we meet up with him, and I back up a little bit. At that point, I never found the blood because it all happened so close and so fast. When they came in there, I was like, I think I shot him right there. I was sat in the spot where I shot, and my buddy went out there. I was like, I think I shot him right around there. It was about a 20-yard shot. Well, we're looking, didn't find the blood. Well, we get back there with the dogs. And he's like, well, bring me to the spot where you shot him at. So he gets back there. I get back in my little pod where I was sitting, and I'm kind of directing him, like, yeah, a little left, a little right. I was like, yeah, think about right there. He's not seeing nothing. Well, his son's with him, and he's in between us, half the distance in between us at 20 yards. Excuse me. And He's like, man, there's blood right here. And that's when I realized I shot the deer at 10 yards. I was like, oh my gosh, the deer he was that close. He's like, there's blood right here. So, but yeah, he ended up tracking him. We tracked him like 3/4 of a mile through like some nasty, just nasty, nasty swamps. I mean, just knee, thigh deep mud. We ended up coming up on this little island that was an island in the middle of the swamp. It usually it's covered with water, but it was so dry that year it had made a little island. There was just some nasty, nasty stuff growing up on it. And as soon as we got up on that little island, at this point I'm thinking I'm not going to find the deer. Even if we do, they're going to jump him up. And the deer's going to run out the country. That was wholeheartedly 100% my thoughts. So we get up on this little island, and the dogs are kind of doing their thing, and he turns around, and he looks at me and said, my dogs are on your deer. Like, what do you mean? It's like, my dogs. He's like, hold on 1 second. Let me give it a second. He looked back. He said, my dogs are on your deer. He said, start recording. So, I started recording, and, we walked up there, and that was the first time I really laid my eyes on it. And it was just, I fell to pieces. It was unbelievable.
Dang.
Yeah, no, dude, that is insane. So talk to us. The motions, of course, you finding the deer, but where did you end up hitting the deer?
So I ended up hitting the deer. I hit him in the hindquarter, upper femur, just below the hip joint, and it broke the femur. And because he was quartered away, when it broke the femur, it deflected, and it drove just up under his rib cage. And when he buckled and kicked, he actually pushed the arrow back out, and that's what I'd seen when he was running off. Because it was 2/3 of my arrow was hanging out of this deer as he was running away. And so what it was, when he buckled and kicked and turned, he had actually pushed that arrow back out. But I must have just got just enough lung in there, when it drove up under that rib, and it hit just enough lung there, and it was fatal.
Well, yeah, lung, intestines, guts. I mean, that deer wasn't going to make it. I mean, for sure. That's insane, dude. And there's I feel like there's quite a few takeaways here. Number one is like, when I hear about palmettos I've been in are like, I don't know,
Tall ones, like waist high.
Yeah, waist
for
high,
us.
maybe waist high. I've never seen like the real big palmettos, but my buddies that hunt down there, they talk about like what you're saying, like almost head high palmettos, and like guys we talked to in Louisiana, same stuff. So when you were like hunting in there, what were you just setting up like maybe there's like a trail right there in that little pinch? I guess like the palmettos like neck down before they expanded back out
Yep.
or something like that, and that's what you were set up on.
That's right. They'd actually kind of neck down in that area, and made just basically like a funnel in there. And they were crossing over from CRP into palmettos, and then and it made just the perfect little funnel in there. And that's where they were actually coming there. It kind of made a funnel, and then it kind of cut off to an edge. But they were running the edge of that, and it just kind of bottlenecked up right there.
Interesting. So they're like you said earlier, they're almost just seeking out in an area that's otherwise pretty flat. They're seeking out corridors of cover, and that's what they're using to travel back and forth.
That's exactly right. That's exactly what they're doing. And because they're so pressured, those deer especially are so pressured. They're just not going to move around. Once they start hearing four-wheelers, and trucks moving around opening day, they're moving underground. That's what they're trying to do. They're trying to get somewhere where they're not going to be seen for the rest of the year. And I think that's what he was doing. He was actually moving out of hardwoods, and he was headed towards some thicker CRP, which was again about a 1/4 mile away. And I think he was headed right toward some CRP to bed up and getting that thick stuff. And probably would have never seen him again. But he spent a lot of time. I think that deer spent a lot of time in those palmettos, because I actually ended up talking to a guy after I killed the buck. A guy contacted me, and he's like, man, look, I don't know you from Adam, but I'm pretty sure that I was hunting that deer last year. I had seen him. And he said, I hate to like get in your business, but would you just mind telling me where you killed him? And I'm like, well, I was like, the deer's dead, and I got to knowing the guy, and I was like, yeah, I don't think it'd be too much. So anyways, I told him. He was like, and he started just unloading the information on me, and like, it's it was absolutely that buck. I mean, it was 100% that buck. But yeah, I mean, he said that from his knowledge that buck spent a lot of time in those palmettos, and I think he was spending a lot of time in that CRP as well.
And oh, that's crazy. So let me ask you, after this experience, what are some takeaways you learned from this experience? Like not only the setup, the hunt, the shot execution, the tracking. Like, what are some of the takeaways you had from that overall experience?
I would say the biggest thing is be ready for anything because it was October 1st, man. Like I know everybody's pumped up October 1st, and everybody's got in their mind, I'm gonna kill a monster this year, and I'm gonna do this. But maybe not everybody, but I know at least me. There's still something in the back of my mind. You don't expect to walk in the woods October 1st and shoot a buck like that sitting on the ground. So, that was so unexpected that it caught me by surprise so much. It made me realize that, hey, as much as you plan and you practice and you try to stay ahead of the game, I really wasn't ready for that buck to walk up. I mean, by no means, I just wasn't ready for him. And but he did. And there's again, I probably could have replayed that 100 times, and I probably would have botched it 100 times. And I think being ready at any point, and I think just paying attention to your surroundings, I think is the biggest thing. Because the spot I was in, I mean, my dad had, he'd kind of picked on me earlier, in the summer because I kept telling him I just had a feeling about that spot. And I know that sounds weird, but I really did. I was like, man, I'm telling you, this is where these deer are moving. I really think there's deer moving through there. I mean, I've hunted that spot 100 times after that. Never seen another buck there. I've seen a lot of deer that's kind of, confirmed what I thought about them moving through there as a huge corridor. I mean, it definitely confirmed that. But, I haven't seen another buck of obviously of that caliber in there. But I mean, that was the biggest thing for me is like, go with your gut. Whenever you think you're onto something, even if you don't have a lot of hard facts to back it up, go with it. And you'll find out either, it was just a feeling or there was something more there. There's a reason I was there that, maybe you can't quite figure out. But, and that's happened to me, in the past and since then. I mean, there's places that I wasn't quite sure why I needed to get there. I couldn't necessarily put my finger on it. I mean, there was, indicators and those things that led me there. But there's spots I just got where I just had that feeling and it works out.
So let me ask you, what are you doing this year to prepare for maybe getting another opportunity opening week of season?
Well, I've got another, I got a little girl that's 5 and I've got we just found out a couple months ago, we got another one on the way due February 12th. So that kind of put a little bit of, a little check on things, but no, I'm still gonna hit it hard this year. I mean, obviously, following season and the following season after that, with a newborn, it's going to be a little hard to hunt. I'm gonna still try to hunt as much as I can, but this year I'm gonna try to hit it hard because I mean I know this is kind of my last hurrah for about a year or so because I'll be pretty busy, but. I'm not really going to change it up much. I don't think I'm going to, do anything much different than I usually do. I think, I feel like I have a good system down. I feel like I've figured out a lot of things, not overcomplicating. And I think that's the biggest thing I've learned is, it's good to think and be a critical thinker. And, there's a point of doing that you have to be a critical thinker if you're going to be, a bow hunter, especially. But at the same time, it could hurt you. You could think too much. And I've kind of got to that point, I guess, in my hunting career where I'm 38 years old. I've been hunting since I was old enough to walk. But bow hunting has been a newer thing to me. It's since I say newer thing, the past 12 years or so is when I really started bow hunting hard and just becoming obsessed with it, quite frankly. And I really don't even gun hunt that much anymore. But anyway, I mean, I think that's the biggest thing is, just overthinking stuff and learning those lessons to not overthink it and just doing what makes sense. I mean, whether that's, really if you're going to be hunting somewhere it's like we hunt where you can't have trail cameras, you can't bait, obviously, things like that. You're really going on the most recent sign and historical sign. I mean, and if you could put the two together where there's historical sign there and then there's very recent sign there, I mean, I think that's the biggest part of it. But yeah, I don't think I'm gonna change much up. I think I'm just gonna do the same thing I've been doing. Still plan on doing a lot of ground hunting this year. Opportunity presents itself.
Okay, awesome.
Nice.
Dude, well, listen, all I'm going to say right now, Chase, congratulations, my man. That is,
Yep.
it's a crazy story, but the thing is, one thing I've learned from this conversation, and you just mentioned it, is like having that gut feeling. And that's what I would call like a classification of woodsmanship. Like you've experienced enough and seen enough situations. And I think everybody can get to this point at some point if you're not already there, just based off personal experiences, that you get that gut feeling of where and when you need to set up and like sticking with it. Even though that like maybe like you 10 years ago would think like, oh man, I need to keep walking, I need to keep doing a spot. Like when you get into those areas, it's that gut feeling based off what you're finding in the scenario and your past experiences. And it's interesting that that's part of like what you really explaining this this hunt was, having the gut feeling going in based off what you had seen in the past and sticking with it, and had the opportunity to kill an absolute giant. Open day, Mississippi public land, October 1st, off the ground with a bow. I mean, it doesn't get more crazier than that. So I'll say this. I'm going to be looking for a deer like that when we go to Kansas. Okay.
Oh, yeah.
So you killed like a Midwestern giant in the deep South, which is awesome to see, dude.
One thing I forgot to mention, it just kind of really puts a bow on top of the entire story, was, we found that buck. It ended up being like 11:30 at night, October 1st, 11:30. So my birthday is October 2nd. So 30 minutes later, it was my birthday. It was, the best birthday present you could get.
Dang, that ain't bad. That ain't bad at
And
all.
I found it. My dad was with me when we found it. He was able to go on there with his tracks. I mean, it was just an awesome experience.
That's
Nice.
awesome.
That's
well,
legit.
well, Chase, as a point of wrapping up, one last thing. Again, just been a long time listener. I like to ask all the listener success story guests this question. What piece of advice would you give to a new listener or viewer of the podcast that's kind of getting started? They see we've done a lot of episodes. What would you tell them to kind of maybe either how to listen, your thought process on applying different things, or just taking little tidbits out of each episode? What kind of advice would you give somebody that's just now kind of finding out about the show and they're trying to dive in on some of the episodes?
I would say, picking out the guests that hunt the same type of terrain habitat you hunt was big for me. Really sitting down and listen to everything they say. I mean, that's pretty hard to do. It's easy to get distracted, but even if that means having to go back and listen to it again, I think that's you always get something out of it. When you do that, you'll hear something that you didn't hear the first time. Find a guest again that hunts the same habitat you've hunted, and just not again overthinking things and going with your gut. If you're not an experienced hunter, I mean, just looking for what makes sense. I mean, you see deer tracks, you see where they've been eating acorns, you see where they most recent sign, hunt it, and it don't matter if, every time you go in the woods and you don't see a deer, it's not a failure. You got to look at it as a learning lesson. I mean, that's what did you take from it? And I think that's the biggest thing that a lot of people can't get past. They go in the woods. They think the first time they go there, every time they walk out the woods empty handed is a failure. And it's not. You just got to look back and say, okay, well, what did I do wrong? Did I do anything wrong? And how can I do better next time?
I love it.
Nice.
I love it. Well, Chase, I appreciate you joining us for this listener success story segment. Viewers, appreciate you watching, and audio listeners, thanks for listening. So I guess from that, we'll just kind of wrap over to our next segment of the podcast on the Thursday Breakdown, where it's just me and Andrew kind of breaking this down and a lot more. So Chase, thanks for joining us.
All right, guys, that's going to wrap up our listener success segment for this week. Jacob, what do you think?
Chase killed a giant deer, public land, Mississippi, with a bow. Opening week.
Yep.
Insane. I mean,
yeah, that was the same time frame that you were hunting last year in Alabama, and you got that unusual cold front,
yeah,
right?
He said it was like in the 40s where he was at, and it got down. It got down into like the low 30s, maybe upper 20s. It got below freezing. We had a frost. We had a hard frost that morning,
Which is weird.
It's super weird. I mean, I don't think I've at least last 8-10 years remember a opening week like that cold. But it was the difference. It wasn't a cool front like Lance Mathers mentioned 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
For early season, it is very much a cold front at that point. So, anyways, but yeah, it was cool to see him capitalize on that opportunity again off the ground with a bow, super close range. I think you said it was like inside like 15 yards when he shot it, and it's like I can't imagine, man, hunting palmettos, getting down and dirty with the deer.
I'd love for that to happen to me this year at some point.
We could.
We're going to try, baby.
It could.
We're going to try.
It might be an Alabama 11 point, but
hey, that's right. Hey, we got some really good feedback on our Q&A episode from this past Monday. We're actually recording this outro on Monday, and we've already got really good feedback from it rolling in just throughout the day today. So if that's something that you enjoyed and you'd like to have, again, more of that Q&A content, email us. Let us know. And also, I want to bring up the whole fishing charter thing again. Okay. Maybe give people a little bit more details on that. We have gotten some emails from some folks who are interested in that. So, Jacob, give people the rundown of what we're talking about there.
So, what we're talking about is booking a Southern Outdoorsman charter. That would be a 24-hour charter on a boat. Of course, on a boat. We're not going to be on a truck doing a 24-hour charter. But we're going to go out of Apalachicola with the boat that we just fished with, or I just fished with, really earlier this month in August, and had just an unbelievable experience. The deckhands were fantastic. The captain is a wealth of knowledge, super nice guy, knows how to put you on a bunch of fish, and it gave us the idea about doing a Southern Outdoorsman kind of charter where some of you guys, listeners, viewers of the podcast can come hang out with us and go on that fishing trip. So we're trying to work out some of the details, and we're trying to figure out if we can find a place where everybody can stay at, where we're all kind of, not like an Airbnb, but like a motel, something where we're all in the same area, so we can kind of hang out in the evenings and stuff, because more than likely what we'd be looking at is at least a 2-day trip. Yeah. One full 24 hours fishing, and then maybe like half a day before, half a day afterwards, something like that. So anyways, we're trying to figure out all those details, but we've already had some really, really great feedback on it, and we're trying to work out the logistics, kind of what it's going to look like, price rise. So I'm trying to figure out exactly what it's going to cost us for the boat, and then try to get everybody all together. But it's going to be awesome. I'll say this for sure. It'll probably be under $1,000. But
$1,000 would be the top.
Yeah, on the top end, but
on the low end, probably $600.
Something like that. So we gotta get all that details worked out. But if you're interested, potentially go on this, it's a bottom fishing charter, 24 hours
in the Gulf of Mexico,
and you're fishing for majority of that time. Like, it's insane.
Now they have bunks on the actual boat where if you get tired, you want to go and take a nap or whatever. You can do that. And also, I just can't get over the fact that they have a big green egg on the boat.
Oh, yeah, you're cooking.
That's insane.
And see, what we would do, we would specifically, we'll get everything booked and get everybody lined up for it. We'll figure out what we want to have food-wise to cook while we're out there, because we'll probably cook some fish. Like, that's what we did while we were out there. Like, one of the guys caught a big scamp grouper that was in season, probably a 35-pound fish. They filleted it, and we did fish tacos.
Like, right there on the boat?
Right there on the boat. Like, dude, they threw in the ice box for like maybe an hour, pulled it out, and then filleted it. We had fish tacos at like 10 o'clock at night. Dude. After already eating something like at 6.
God, that sounds so
And
awesome.
It was so good. So, like, we brought everything for the guys I went with, brought everything for the tortillas, the cilantro, the onion, it's all kinds of stuff for the fish tacos. It was really good. But we'd figure out kind of meal-wise what we're going to have, some stuff that we can cook and just have a really good time. So.
Yeah, definitely. So if you're interested, email us. info@thesouthernoutdoorsman.com, or go to the website. There's a contact form over there, and put fishing charter in the subject line so we can get at least somewhat of a head count of how many people would be interested, because we got to figure out how much the boat's going to cost, got to figure out how much it's going to cost for everybody to come and be there, so we got to gauge interest. I think we got maybe a couple people, not very many people though, actually used the email. We had some YouTube comments and stuff. If you're actually interested, definitely email us. That's the easiest way for us to keep track of that stuff. Yep. And, and I wanted to bring it back up because most of the feedback we got was like, well, how much is it going to cost? And more logistical questions like that. So that's kind of what we're looking at. Again, this will be a late summer trip next year. So we just want to get head count, man.
Yep, for sure. And it's going to be awesome. But I think what we're going to do is, we're kind of judging interest right now, but I think what we're going to do is first, because you weren't on the Thursday Hunter Hangout meeting last week.
Oh, yeah. I forgot to ask how that went.
It went really good. We had some great feedback, and we were on again like 2.5 hours. Like, I told the guys, like, I'm good to stay on as long as y'all want to. And it was like, got on at 7 p.m. Central. I think we got off. Actually, dude, it might have been 3 hours. I think I got off like at 10 something.
Nice.
But anyways, had a great conversation. But one of the guys, Sam, I think it was Sam Brown from Maryland, he brought up about the fishing charter. Mm-hmm. And he's like, asking details. And he's like, dude, you need to open it up first for Patreon members. And then, if Patreon members get first dibs, and then it opens up to the remainder of the audience members at that point. And I'm like, we might do that. I think that'd be a good way to do it.
Yeah.
So, if you're a Patreon member of the Southern Outdoorsman, again, link down below. If you're not, make sure to kind of keep an eye out for the next probably month or so as we kind of figure out some details. And we'll post it there first and kind of figure out who wants to be able to get on that boat, because we'd be able to have a total on the boat of 20 people, counting us too.
Yeah.
So we'll have to figure out exactly what that looks like. So it'll be very limited entry. Again, not all of you guys are going to be able to join. Everybody wants to go. So we'll open up the Patreon first, and then after Patreon, depending on how many people from Patreon wants to join us, open it to the public, and it'll be first come, first serve. So
Yeah. It'd be a fun time, man. It'd be a really, really fun time.
So, and then I had to wear my Alabama Crimson Tide t-shirt, by the way, because this weekend we're playing our first game.
Yeah, I didn't realize football season was starting this weekend.
Yep.
This is totally out of character for this podcast, but you got a prediction on how Alabama's going to do this year? Now that Nick's gone?
I get my hopes up. I'm ready for a tearjerker at some point in the season.
Being an Auburn fan,
what did you tell me on the way over here? You're like,
I was like, I think y'all might have hired your own Harsin. Like, Brian Harsin, he came from the Pacific Northwest, and it worked out great for him. I follow him on Instagram. He's like up in Fiji. He's like all over the place, enjoying that Auburn money. Got fired, got paid like $28 million.
Yeah.
That doesn't suck. But yeah, what do you think's going to happen? Do you think y'all are going to suck?
We'll find out. I don't know. I don't have my hot. I like football, but because of how much we hunt, especially again, pretty much like this weekend, like this first game will be the only one I'll probably watch for a while.
Yeah.
Until we play maybe like an LSU.
Yeah, that's kind of how I am. I catch the big games throughout the year. Do like a football, like we'll plan a football party. We'll get like Sam and everyone, or like get you to come over, and like Colton and everybody.
Yeah, but see, y'all are always watching Auburn games, which is just depressing.
Well, it depends.
I feel so bad for the Auburn.
Well, yeah, it's been
Auburn fans.
It's a little bit of rough patch, going through a rough patch right now. It's been rough, but that is one reason that it's good that I like hunting so much, because it's a hard life being an Auburn fan sometimes. Just being honest here, guys. Just being honest.
Yeah, since what was that quarterback last time y'all beat us?
Bo Nix.
Oh, I forgot about Bo Nix. No, I heard he's starting. This is so sidetracked. We don't ever talk sports on here. But he's starting for the Denver Broncos.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
good for him.
He got pushed through.
Good for him.
So, of all the new quarterbacks, I think he performed probably the best. Their opening week games. So that'd be interesting to kind of follow along.
Yeah, definitely.
He doesn't claim Auburn anymore. He's an Oregon guy. So
I don't know about all that.
Auburn guys. It's kind of like Alabama with Jalen Hurts. Alabama, like when Jalen Hurts went to Oklahoma, did so good after he played at Alabama, and then he went to the NFL. All the Alabama fans like, "Oh, go Jalen!" I'm like, dude, he's not. I mean, he was with Alabama for a long time, but
that's right. Hey, that was a good story though. Him and Tua. That's a great story. Anyways, I digress. Let's talk licking branches, baby. Licking branches is where it's at right now. So it's a late August. My update for trail camera stuff that we've had going on is, like I mentioned a couple weeks ago, went and scouted a brand new piece of public for us. Went into an area that I thought I would find some deer around some aggressive terrain. Ended up, I found a big community scrape, but the licking branches, I was going to put a camera on it, but there was already a camera on it. Turns out it was Shane Parker's camera, ironically, and we're going to go back and put a camera in that spot probably next week. But I ended up finding a licking branch, just to catch everyone up if you didn't listen to that episode a couple weeks ago. I found a licking branch. This was, I guess, early August. They're scrapes from last year. Pretty big scrape on a big, long secondary ridge point coming down out of some aggressive terrain. Once you get down towards the bottom, who is that? Oh, dude, let's go. Fishing trip. We just got an email about the fishing trip from a guy named Andrew. Sweet. All right. Appreciate it, Andrew, if you're listening right now. That's funny. I totally just lost my train of thought. Okay, so long ridge point coming down. Found a scrape down near the end of it. The scrape is from last year, like, the scrape on the ground. Mm-hmm. And there's a little secondary scrape off to the side. Like, it's a pretty nice looking scrape, like one that would fire me up. And I noticed that the licking branch on it was fresh tore up, like freshly twisted. The leaves were freshly broken on it, like they'd been working it. Put a camera on it and got deer on it pretty much immediately. We had a new buck show up last night.
We've had a handful of bucks show up.
Yeah, and they're all coming through, and they're working the crap out of that licking branch like it's the middle of the rut.
Yep.
And they're still in full velvet, and I just wanted to bring it up because we talk about it a lot, but if there's new listeners coming through, like maybe it's something that I wish I'd have known earlier. If you're on public ground or if you're on a property that doesn't allow you to bait and you're trying to get buck inventory, that's the way to do it, in my opinion. Go find those licking branches because they're hitting those suckers right now, and they're coming through and they're throwing that head up and chewing on the licking branch. You get a great look at their rack, especially if you got your camera on video mode. And I can't think of a better way to congregate bucks in one spot this time of year. Again, if you can't put out minerals or bait or something like that.
Yeah, or if you didn't have like smaller food plots you could run a camera on. Definitely, I mean, the licking branches seem to be super hot. It's funny because we've talked to a handful of other guys, both podcast guests and then also just buddies of ours, and they're all seeing a big uptick in licking branch.
Yeah.
Almost said Licking Branch Magic. Greg Skufka. Great episode, by the way. Greg Skufka's episode, Licking Branch Magic on the Southern Outdoors and Podcast. But, I've had two guys today message me, two listeners today. Like, one's in East Texas, and he's got some hammers on public that he's chasing. I'm talking some big deer.
Yeah. And
they're all wearing out licking branches. And he actually brought that Greg Skufka episode. He's like, I've been using that, and it's worked really, really good for him over there.
Okay.
But, all across the Southeast and really across the country, a lot of people are seeing upticks of licking branch, activity, bucks using them. And what was it? Future guest of the podcast, Chad Grove, we were talking to him last week.
Yeah.
And he said he's had bucks on licking branches since, I think, early July.
Oh, yeah.
Hitting licking branches. So it's one of those things that, especially for summer scouting, it's such a great thing. If you can find a couple really good scrapes with some really good licking branches, especially if you can find some that actually look like they've been worn and used recently, throw a camera up on it.
Yeah, I've got a camera on a absolute humdinger of a licking branch in one spot, but it's not a cell camera. So I'm pretty eager to check that one. And
what? Where?
I ain't telling you. Up
like where we're talking about this other one?
No. Totally different property.
Okay.
The one is way back.
Okay, I got you.
That one. And yeah, that's not a cell camera, but I'm very, very, very intrigued to see what's on that one. And then the one that these bucks have been showing up on, there's two just really solid 8 points, and then this deer is a 10 point, but he's not like a typical 10. He's a 10 point because on his left side, he's got what? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 points on his left, and then 4 on his right.
He's got split brows.
No, he doesn't have a split brow. He's got a whole other brow tine, like a whole extra point growing out of the base of his antlers.
Is that what it is?
Yeah, and then he's got his normal brow tine, and then right at the base, he's got a different one coming out straight, and then he's got the other points, and then on his right side, he's just a regular 4-point side.
Man, we're gonna lose some bucks' eyes this year.
Right?
He gets to fighting.
Yeah, I bet he kills some other deer with that little unicorn point he's got.
Yeah.
He's a really nice buck.
Yeah,
he's definitely a nice buck, and that camera's. It's only been there for a couple weeks now, and that's the only camera in that area that we have on a scrape, and we've already got 3 shooters on it, just right here in August. So it'll be interesting to see. Also, the cameras that I have on the hunting club right now that are on scrapes, I mean, they are hitting them. They are hitting those scrapes right now. Again, full velvet. These properties are not close to each other at all, but it's kind of a common theme this time of year. I think it's. We've had cameras on licking branches throughout most of summer, and they would walk by them, but they weren't working the licking branches a lot. We have definitely seen an uptick in them actually working that licking branch a lot, and I'm wondering if it has to do with maybe the testosterone is kind of starting to rise up right now. They're getting ready to strip the velvet off here late August. Things are changing. A lot of the leaves on the trees are starting to turn yellow right now. The poplars are the first trees that kind of start dropping. They're starting to drop their leaves already. Had some cold nights here lately. Everyone's feeling kind of
not cold.
Listen, cool. For August in Alabama. We've had some cold nights here lately, and I think everyone's getting excited, including the bucks. I think they're ready to go. I think these bucks are fired up, son.
I'm sure they're enjoying that 55-degree mornings or nights. Yeah, that to me is exciting because kind of branching out and dropping cameras off in some new areas that we've looked at in the past, but never really spent a lot of time in, and automatically like you're getting bucks on camera. That's pretty cool, and that's why I'm eager to kind of get back over there and drop some more cameras off in a couple other spots in that general area. Because it's like the one thing, because you haven't all the photos of all the shooters, they're all at night. I guess that 10 point. He's coming through. I think it's like 5:30 in the morning.
Yeah, the other bucks too. There's 2 of them that are running together, 2 8 points that are running together. One of them is just just a normal 8-point. Like, he's a good deer for sure. I'd definitely shoot him, but he's nothing like super unique. He just looks like your classic 8-point right outside the ears. Not crazy wide, not crazy tall. The other one, he's about the same width, but he's got some really nice tine length. He's really tall.
And better main beams.
Better main beams too. And both of those deer, every time they've come through, they've been together. And they have been coming through at the same time at like 5:45 a.m. So not super far away from daylight. And also they're coming up from the bottom and they're kind of angling up into that more aggressive terrain. It seems like they're going uphill. It's kind of hard to tell because you don't always get the direction that they're leaving, but we have been getting the direction that they're coming from. And they're either going uphill or they're side hilling around. I'm not totally sure yet, so we're planning on going back in there pretty soon and just peppering some more cameras out in the area just to see what else we can pick up, because there's no doubt there's more bucks in there, and we probably haven't found the biggest one yet.
Nah, I don't think so. Speak about finding some big bucks and on licking branches. Our hunter hangout meeting with Patreon. Again, we do it every other Thursday. We had it last Thursday. The next one will be this coming Thursday. So not when this episode drops, the following week at 7 p.m. We do it on Patreon. It's a really fun Zoom meeting that we've been doing since May, April timeframe.
Yeah, a couple months.
And we have one of our listeners, which I'm not going to mention his name. Keep it a little secret. You know, if you're on the hunter hangout meeting, you saw it because he posted the photo in there. But he's the biggest buck he's ever had on camera, and he's in North Carolina. And he posted, and it is a massive typical. I'm talking huge deer.
Okay.
Huge deer. And we were going back and forth, and where he's got it on camera, he's got it in daylight, like multiple times in daylight, like 8, 9 o'clock in the morning. And, you know, their season opens, by the time this episode comes out, it'll be not this coming Saturday, the following Saturday.
Yep.
Their season opens. And he's getting real kind of eager about trying to figure out this buck a little bit more, because it's kind of random. Like, he's coming through like 2-3 days a week during daylight.
Yep.
But it's on a scrape, and he's kind of like, he's saying he was saying he's not necessarily hitting the looking branch, like he maybe go up and nudge a little bit, but he's just kind of passing through there, and there's some other bucks coming to it. But I mean, just a gigantic buck. And I told him I'm going to try and get him connected with Chad to kind of talk about, you know, what he should do about moving cameras around or game planning for that specific buck. But if he can kill that deer, we got to get him on the podcast.
Okay.
It's unreal deer. So, especially if he can kill it in velvet, it'll be insane.
Oh my gosh.
Insane. I mean, it looks like something. I told him, like, dude, if I could see a deer like that in Kansas, I'll be thrilled.
Okay.
Yeah. Huge. So anyway, I'm real eager to kind of see. But again, he's got a camera on one of those scrapes. That he's got other bucks hitting the looking branch, but that buck's by far the biggest buck, and he's kind of come through and nudging the looking branch and kind of just easing on through. So I was like, okay, all right.
Interesting.
Game plan.
Good to know. North Carolina, you said. Interesting. Probably not anywhere near where we're going.
No.
Yeah. Okay. Anyways, yeah. I guess we got a scouting trip planned, and then we're gonna be hunting North Carolina here pretty soon. Mm-hmm. So gonna be hitting a little bit of mountain stuff over there. It's gonna be fun. Hit that opening day. It's gonna be a little different. I don't think Jacob's that excited about it.
I mean, I am.
Oh, that was convincing. Yeah. I mean, I guess I am. Where are you at with it? Well, our buddy Zach texted me this morning. He's like, "Oh, Red getting excited about North Carolina." I'm like, I don't know. I don't think he is.
Yeah. No, I'm listen.
Look, Jacob's afraid of big hills.
No, that's not. No, I mean, I like that. It's just like, if we had the time to go there, like late October, early November,
mm-hmm.
I'd be very, very jazzed up. Not the one thing I'm interested in seeing when we get there is how tight the movement is, because we're only going to be there for, like, I think you said like 5 days hunting.
Yeah.
4 or 5 days.
Yep.
It's like, how quickly can you locate a buck like that when they're not covering a bunch of ground?
Yeah.
Because one thing during the rut, it's like, dude, you get rut time frame, implement some calling, set up on a good transit, like a good travel corridor on a big topographical feature. I feel very like, you give me 3 days, I'd feel very confident in that. Mm-hmm. The early season, to me, it's so hit or miss when you're going to someplace brand new that's not ag. Again, I've never hunted. What do you think? I've hunted some ag early season, but not a ton. But it's not like you're doing like one of those. You're sitting there 100% just like looking for where a buck's coming out into a field, cutting down and trying to get set up on them. Like, yeah, it'd be a mix of maybe feed trees, but again, it might be too early for some of the oaks to drop. Maybe not. We might get there and get some oaks drop. So I'm real interested in seeing how tight some of that movement is, and like truly how close do we have to try to get in order to find where the activity is going.
Yeah, there's a couple different tactics I'm interested in trying. One of them being when we interviewed Kelsey Moss, and he was talking about hunting some of the mountains where he's from and locating these thick areas that are holding bucks, and essentially just hopping from one of those to another, trying to find the sign, trying to find, maybe where they're coming out and feeding, and essentially just, throwing it at the wall and seeing what sticks. And I think I've identified some places on the map that match that description pretty well. Some different thick areas, like even up in the mountains, like whether it be a mountain laurel thicket. I think some of the thickets I found, I don't really know what they are. I think they're some kind of coniferous tree. Like, I don't know. I haven't been up there, so I don't know if they're pines or what they are, but it's definitely different, and it's definitely steep and aggressive, and I'm 99% sure it's going to be thick. So I'm pretty interested in seeing what that ends up looking like when we get up there. But that's what I'm interested in hitting. Jacob's confidence is absolutely in the toilet.
No, it's not that. It's just like I'm not going in with any kind of expectation, like high expectation or anything like that. I'm looking at it from the aspect of like, we're going to learn the area, and my thought process is try to get a buck killed. Oh, that was another thing. Listeners, were your ears burning last Thursday?
Oh, God.
Bro, there was a couple of the guys that are like, what is Andrew talking about going up to North Carolina and just smacking does? He's like, one of the guys, I think it was, it might have been Brian, it might have been Zach, or Sam, one of the guys, he was like, if Andrew kills a doe on top of one of those mountains, he's like, you just need to leave him. Let him deal with it and just head back to the truck. Tell him you can deal it. He's like,
hey, bro, it's all downhill.
Dude, the guys are like, dude, I ain't going out of state shooting does. I shoot does back home.
I'll just roll her down the side of the mountain.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true.
And then also one of the guys said, if you, he's like, if Andrew for real, is taking 6 or 8 broadheads, whatever, and if he needs more broadheads,
I saw that.
He's like, I'll bring them to him. Okay, I'll bring him a pack of severs.
I'll personally deliver.
Yeah,
I did see that too. Mm-hmm. That was pretty funny.
So
love you guys.
Anyway, so yeah, it was a great conversation. But we talked a little bit about that hunt, and like another thing. Anytime I'm in those mountain settings where you have a bear season, but it's not open when you're there, also is a little frustrating. Because I'd almost be more excited to go up there and shoot a bear with the bow.
Yeah, I do wish that it was.
Because we just don't get that opportunity in Alabama.
No, we don't. And there are quite a few bears in this area. I saw a bear last time I was there.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's kind of a bummer. I wish it was more like Georgia where it opened up early.
Yeah, Georgia does it right. Yeah. Georgia does it really, 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 really good for that opportunity. A little mixed bag opportunity. You get in there, start finding a bunch of bear sign. Well, we are switching species at that point. It's like,
yes, sir.
Ain't gotta wait. That's the thing. We're gonna go out there. We're gonna see it. We're gonna see a giant bear, and we're like, can't do nothing about it.
Yep. Well, it is what it is.
I know.
Hopefully, we go out there and see a big old buck. All right. You about ready to hit some Q&A submissions?
Yeah, dude. I love some Q&As. So appreciate everybody's been writing in Q&As. Also appreciate everybody's been buying all the new apparel. Again, all the hats, the shirts, soon to come out, more shirts and hoodies. Andrew mentioned this, I think, on Monday's episode. But if you want first opportunity for some of the new apparel drops that we have coming up, again, with the hoodies, the new T-shirt designs, all that kind of stuff. Also, when some of our some of our hats get back in stock, make sure you're subscribed to our newsletter. It's the Woodsman Wire. You can go to thesouthernoutdoorsman.com and subscribe there, or it's linked down in the show notes below. Click it, submit your email, and then you'll be one of the first. You'll be a part of the group that gets first contact about all the new apparel drops. But with the Q&As, appreciate everybody submitting Q&As as well. So we got some good ones. Again, that you guys have been, I guess, more eager the last couple of weeks to kind of get some submitted before season gets here. So, again, you can submit those links down in the show notes in the video description below, or you can go to thesouthernoutdoorsman.com, and there's a tab there for the Q&A form filled out. Give us as much detail. Like, you don't have to mention specific pieces of public land, but if you're hunting some area, give us very specific details of, like, what's the habitat like, the terrain, topography, how everything lays out, because that helps us be able to answer your questions a lot more effectively. So appreciate everybody submitting those. Hope you all enjoyed Monday's episode where we did a big Q&A segment. So
yes, sir.
What we got, Andrew?
All right, this one is from Dennis Rooney from Tennessee. He said, there are some public areas that trail cameras are prohibited. How would you approach map scouting with Onyx or some other e-scouting service with access? Hold on, I lost my place. With access for on-the-ground scouting is very limited, and the property being in the range of 100,000 to about 70,000 acres that are huntable. The public isn't accessible all at once, and he says a lot here.
Yeah,
that
let's
you
skip
could
through.
probably,
I'm already tracking what he's saying. Okay,
yeah,
you can keep going.
He's, maybe saying a little too much there. There's always big deer killed there every year.
Yep.
I'm what you pros would term a weekend warrior. I just want to maximize opportunities I do get to hunt the property. So he's saying can't use trail cameras, can't access certain parts of it, and he only gets to hunt on weekends. So
Yes.
what is the best way to break down and tackle this area? I definitely have an answer. What do you think?
Do you want me to take your answer? Because I'm probably going to say it.
I bet you are going to take it. You son of
Two
a gun.
things, and I'm going to answer both of them. Number one, because this is how I used to always. I mean, I still like doing this, or like not necessarily using trail cameras since going into an area. Two things. Number one, depending on that area, I'm pretty certain I know what you're talking about. The terrain topography, like looking at large landscape terrain features that would funnel deer. Specifically, I'm looking at this. I'll be honest, more so pre-rut time frame, and trying to find security cover in and around those terrain features. Specifically, some saddles, but again, some of these long drainages that connect to different ridge systems, and then also looking at habitat diversity. So if you can't run trail cameras, find the most habitat edges that come together in one area, and you're going to find deer there as long as it's not getting crazy pressured by a bunch of other guys. And more than likely, you're going to find some really good buck sign and probably have an opportunity at a decent buck in that area.
Yeah, that's I agree with every bit of that. Definitely habitat diversity, especially if the area is flat, but even if it's not flat, you're going to want to look for that habitat diversity where there's just as many different habitat types, whether it be hardwoods meeting pines or like a fresh cutover meeting pines, or where you've got three corners where you've got a fresh cutover in one spot, you've got pines butting up against that, and then you've got a hardwood SMZ running up against like through the middle of them or on the edge of those, just where there's multiple different habitat types coming together. But then also I'll say this as well, that'll get you started, but because you're a weekend warrior and you don't have a lot of time to devote to like really getting out there and like learning specific spots, I would put a premium on boots on the ground scouting with in season. So when you actually go to hunt the spots, maybe not necessarily always go in blind, maybe a little bit different in the rut if you've just got super limited time and you're just trying to get in a tree and hunt. But I would really recommend going out and not being so focused on getting in a tree. Find those areas with habitat diversity and terrain diversity that you're interested in, big terrain features, and go to them with a stand on your back, bow in the hand. And if you don't find good sign there, then go to plan B. And if you don't find good sign there, then go to plan C. And if you don't find, and so on and so on and so on, until you find that most recent sign. So it's good to do the map scouting and try to get yourself a good starting point, but don't get so hung up on it that you sit in a spot that, when you get there, it just doesn't look how you thought it would. Would you agree with that?
Yep. Also, something else to think about, just because on properties like what you're describing, not all of it is open at the same time. It kind of flip-flops. So one thing to pay attention to is when you start finding deer on a portion of that public, when it opens back up, if you have to access a different portion of the public, looking at commonalities between where you're seeing deer habitat-wise and trying to find that in some of the other units or some of the other zones that you can hunt later on if that one's not previously open. So always pay attention to correlation between certain habitat types and where you're jumping deer, where you're seeing deer habitat-wise and terrain-wise. And then if you have to move to a different portion of the public, specifically look for some of those same things in that area, and you're going to start off on the right foot a lot better. Because there's also, when you're in an area like that, if you find deer in a certain habitat and terrain type, more than likely, if you go to a different portion of that public and it sets up kind of the same, you're going to find deer in that area as well. So pay attention to that and don't forget about that.
Yeah, definitely. And do the boots on the ground scouting in season, especially if you don't have history with the areas that you're hunting in. Do that boots on the ground. Find the most recent sign and hunt that. Get a good starting point from the map scouting, but it's not the gospel. Like don't just don't be so hung up on the map scouting that you hunt areas that don't have any sign in them. Because I've done that a lot over the years. I've done that a lot. All right. This is from Lane Simmons from Georgia. He said, how do you go about having success on public land that has an abundance of roads, making it very hard to get away from roads/pressure? I appreciate the amazing content. Thanks, guys. Man, the place that me and you kind of cut our teeth when it comes to public land hunting very much fits that description, I feel like. It is extremely roaded up. whether it be from timber or other kind of industries that take place on a lot of WMAs across the Southeast. It's really difficult, especially in heavily timbered areas where they're cutting pines and they're planting pines. There is a road on every single ridgetop, literally every single ridgetop. Not all of them are open roads that you can drive, but you can definitely walk down pretty much all of them. So that makes it nearly impossible to get. Like people talk about, oh, I'm going to go a mile back on that place. If you walk a mile, you've crossed a road on that mile.
Or two or three.
Yeah, you just cannot walk. You can't really go deep on that place.
The only way you can is just following creek systems. But then again, you're just paralleling the roads at that point.
Yeah, like the creek systems, you can, like let's say that you've got thickets on both sides of that road and you've got a creek drainage down below it. And let's say that the thickets on the edge of the road are so thick that you can't really walk through it or you wouldn't normally walk through it. You can loop in around and get in that creek bottom and parallel the road. And then you've got like this buffer between you and the road of all that thick cover, right? And you can use that to get away from people. But also some of the better spots that I've ever hunted on WMAs like that have been just little corner spots kind of out of, like in big bends of the road where it's spots that people just drive right past because there's a lot of roads on the place doesn't necessarily mean that people are parking all over the place and walking in. I think in areas like that, you just have to get a little bit more creative with your access and don't always park at a normal parking lot and think that you have to walk to whatever's behind that gate or trailhead or whatever the case may be. Hunt maybe off the edge of it somewhere or hunt, on the other side of the road from the gate or hunt in a big bend or park at one of those gates and then walk back up the road, a decent ways and then dive into the woods and just look for little spots like that people drive right past.
Yeah, more and more recently, it's the best spots I've hunted in areas like that has a lot of roads. A lot of times I can see my truck, maybe 100 yards, maybe 200 yards from me. But like sometimes I can see my truck, but it's a spot that there's always the commonality of thick cover, and there's a reason why people are walking past that spot.
Yeah.
Because, like, there's that one where you had the guy climb right next to you. I literally, when I climbed in that spot on that clear cut, I could literally look back and see the trucks.
Yep.
And I saw two different bucks that morning. One of them, if I had not talked to, if we hadn't interviewed Scott Seals and Nick Harris beforehand, I would have dumped that 8-point. Because, I mean, he was one of those really nice Alabama bucks. Like, I took videos of him, a bunch of videos on my phone and sent to our group message all our buddies, and they're like, why don't I hear a gunshot? Because we're all kind of hunting the same general area. And I'm like, oh, just interview these guys. If I want to kill
Zach was like mad at you.
Yeah, if I really want to kill a big deer, I can't shoot that deer because it's a nice buck. Like, it's a really nice buck, but it's not like, again, I was trying to find a much bigger deer. But again, it's one of those spots that you have really thick cover, you have habitat diversity, and it doesn't always have to be super far back. Like especially one thing that I always pay attention to when you're hunting roads like that is look at where you're finding big buck tracks crossing those dirt roads. Like,
yeah, you can almost use it as an advantage.
Yeah, I mean, I think it is because you can. I mean, Mike Pike used to talk about that. It's so easy to ride those roads and check for buck crossings and where they're crossing at. And if you start finding a set of tracks going like back and forth on a roadbed like that, where there's drivable or you have to walk in on it.
Yeah.
Well, you kind of know like, hey, this buck's actually using this area a decent bit. Like it's not just a one time coming through here, and you can run trail cameras really effectively like that. You can ride roads, find crossings, stick a camera up 5-10 yards into the woods right there into the thick stuff, set a camera on it, and then run, and you use it like a trap line, like we mentioned trapping on Monday's episode.
Yeah.
Where you can literally ride these roads. You could have 15 cameras out on 15 road crossings or trail crossings on the roads and check every single one of those once a week and be very little impact.
Yeah, you're not impacting because it's 5 feet off the side of the road in the thicket. Yeah, me and Michael, dude, that back on that WMA, it was like the summer of bucks. It was the SOB. During the SOB, we were driving. Dude, I would wait until a rainstorm and drive around on those roads. Like, you get like a really good rain and you give it a couple hours or give it like a day and then go drive around and find all those fresh tracks where they're crossing. That was so eye-opening. And we located so many different bucks doing that. Yep. And it was just a really, really effective tactic. So you can do that. Also, if some of these roads, I mean, obviously not all those roads are going to be drivable. So I don't know exactly what all of your regulations. Let's see. What state did I say he was from? Sorry, got to look this back up. You're in Georgia. Okay, yeah, so definitely Georgia. on some of those roads that are closed, whether it's, again, they're gated or just like no vehicular access, as long as it's, okay on the WMA, you can hunt those closed road beds, and those make for excellent, excellent, excellent rifle spots. If you've got a nice long road bed that goes through some thick cover, and usually people are like walking to the end of it to get to like a hardwood bottom, I can right off the top of my head think of like 5 different spots that are like this. And people walk right down that road, and they'll walk a mile down the road just to get 100 yards off the backside of it. Sometimes you can park at that gate and you can walk 50 yards up there and just sit on the side of the road and watch the long straightaway through that thick cover, and that's a really good rifle spot. So actually you can use those roads to your advantage if you're rifle hunting in a lot of cases, especially, again, when they run through thick cover. So I would not overlook that either. That's a really good option, and we've been successful doing that, and we know a lot of guys who have been successful doing that as well. So that's a super effective tactic, especially, again, rifle hunting. Anything else with the roads?
No, I mean, just don't look at it as a disadvantage. I mean, just you got to learn to be adaptable with it. Again, those bucks, they can't get away from the roads. So just understand that, and also understand if there's if it's really roaded up, like you're saying, more than likely, like Andrew, you mentioned earlier, there's a lot of timber activity. If that's the case, there's thick cover all around. Those bucks can be bedded right off the edge of those roads, like 10, 15 yards. So just don't ever think of that it's a disadvantage because people can walk everywhere, because they can. But a lot of times they're missing some of that because they're trying to walk way further back, and they're actually, a lot of the bucks are actually way closer to the roads than you think it is, or you think they would be, just because there's an abundance of thick cover and there's food right there, all that browse.
Yep, definitely. All right, last question that we got today. This is from this group message that we're in with Shane and everyone.
Chris's message came up and I about started laughing what he just said.
I mean, goodness gracious. I get no less than 300 notifications a day.
Easy.
Good. I gotta love group messages. It is pretty funny though. There's a lot of funny stuff in there. All right. This is from Jamie from Mississippi. He said, I hunt 128 acres of private. This past season, we were forced to clear cut about 99% of the land due to pine beetles. Hey, that's going on all over the place. Usually I'm getting pictures of a few bucks in the summer, but all I'm seeing is does so far. The land was a 30-plus-year-old pine plantation with approximately 10 acres of white oaks along a flowing creek. None of the oaks were cut. The furthest shot I used to have was approximately 200 yards, but now there are several places where you can see almost 800 yards. I know the bucks haven't left the area, but there are so many areas for the deer to be bedding since it's been clear-cut, I don't know where to begin looking for the bucks. The landscape is 70% of the land is 200 foot in elevation, with the back 30% rising 260 feet in elevation. There's a 10-acre pond in the front of the property and a flowing creek on our border. Currently running 3 cameras, and we'll add more this weekend. I don't know where to begin looking/placing cameras in this clear cut to see where the bucks are currently hanging out. Thanks for any advice.
You said it was cut last year?
Yeah, due to pine beetles. Wait, did he say last year?
I don't know.
Yeah, this past season we were forced to cut 99% of it.
So number one, that clear cut's still not very tall.
Yeah.
Like if it's got slash on the ground, it's probably like just little stump sprouts coming up. Like it's probably no higher than waist high.
Yeah.
So they're probably, and it's probably pretty sparse. It's probably not like crazy thick yet. Again, like with forbs and grasses coming up. So there's probably a good chance they're not really bedding in it right now. Okay.
Yeah.
So number one, I would be walking the creek, that one property boundary where you have the creek at, and look for creek crossings, just like last Monday's episode, not this past Monday, but 2 weeks ago with Lance Smathers, and actually drops his cameras, especially if your neighbor's property maybe has some like better bedding cover, because they're definitely going to come out in that clear cut and be feeding all summer long. Like I guarantee it. And also, if it's like what you said, you can see upwards of 800 yards and some of that. I'd go out there and glass. What state he said he was in? Georgia?
Mississippi.
I'd go out and glass that stuff like in the evening. Like I'd get out there,
Oh, yeah.
climb a tree on the edge of it, or get up, somehow get elevated and sit there and glass with some binos, or if you have a spotting scope, go get you one. And I would glass. That's what I would do if it's a fresh clear cut like that. Like we used to do that a little bit in the past, and but the problem is a lot of the clear cuts weren't that big where you get up and really see very well. But if it sets up like that where you can see a long ways, dude, you could do so much. You could have such an advantage just glassing right now while it's still small, like the vegetation's still short. But I'd run creek crossing, cameras on creek crossings on that creek or on that creek itself. I'd glass, and then also I would walk the edge of the clear cut and I would look specifically for drainages and like little draws that are coming up out of like, off your neighbors, coming up onto your place, coming down to your place, and specifically look around those for tracks and droppings, and also browse pressure. I mean, it's really easy if you walk those clear cuts, especially the perimeter of it, to find where the deer are coming into that clear cut to feed, especially when it's a young clear cut, because you're going to find like a corner or a section of it. It might be 20 yards wide, it might be 50 yards wide, where it is just browsed down. Like you can see all the top's been nipped off, and put a camera on that. Like get you a T-post stake it out, put your camera on it, make sure it's facing north, face south, you're going to get a lot of sunlight photos. And you can catch deer and catch some of those bucks coming in and out of the timber off your neighbor, but coming up and feeding in your clear cut at night. But the cool thing is, it's going to be kind of hard during bow season, early season. Like, I know you said you got some white oaks, but during the rut, you should have a ton of does out there. And if you're rifle hunting, oh my God, it don't get much better than that. I'll be honest. If it was me, I'd go out there and I'd practice shooting some distance with your rifle, just get good at it. And I would set up accordingly, where you're watching some of those subtle little terrain features. Like, it sounds like you're in kind of some hill country, but nothing big. Find some of those little drainages, see if there's a little saddle through that clear cut the deer could cross at, and I would be watching that for the rut.
100%. I don't really have much to add to that other than I would kind of walk all the edges if I'm looking for places to put cameras out specifically, or just trying to go read sign and kind of figure out what's going on in the area. All the edges of that clear cut, I would just walk it. And that might be like a pretty big area to walk, but I would definitely hit all the edges, whether it's bordering I'm sure there's some woods around that pond that you're talking about. I'd walk around that pond, even if it's on the front side of the property. I would walk the flowing creek, the edge of the hardwoods on that flowing creek, the property lines, anywhere where the cutover stops and there's something else there. I would just walk all of that, because you're going to pick up deer trails and you're going to pick up scrapes doing that. And that's how our club isn't quite cut that bad, but there is a lot of open ground on our club. And that's what I did in those areas, is I just walked all the edges of that thicker cover and those openings, and ended up finding some scrapes in a place where we've like really struggled to find good buck sign on that place. But the places that we have found buck sign, it's been doing something like that, hitting those edges, walking those, and then putting cameras up on those scrapes. And that's eventually how we ended up getting some of the better bucks that we got on camera, was doing that. But no, I agree. That sounds like a rifle hunter's dream right there.
Yeah.
Might be a bummer if you're a bow hunter.
Now, he didn't specify, is this a lease, a club, or private land he owns? That's more details, guys. If you submit a Q&A, please let us know that.
I don't know. He says we were forced to cut 99%. So I don't know. Maybe he does that. It's 128 acres.
Might be a small lease or something. Or maybe they own it. If you own that property, this is when, like my uncle did, Anthony's brother, Michael, rent you a dozer or a skid steer, maybe a little dozer, and go push you in some lanes through some of that thick cover. And you can plant some food plots on it, but really just having like some natural wildlife openings that you just keep as grass when everything else kind of grows up around it, especially if you can run fire through it, where you have like some shot opportunities, specifically rifle hunting later in the next couple of years. Because within 2-3 years, that place is going to be very tough to hunt. Very tough to hunt.
Yeah.
If it just grows back and there's no fire being used, anything like that. Like if it's just natural regen, if they didn't plant it, which they probably did, timber company probably came and planted it, it can make it pretty tough within, at least 4 to 5 years for sure.
Yeah, definitely. I agree. Also, I would be a little bit interested in that back half of the property where you said the elevation rises up about 60 feet. Just where that elevation starts rising up, I'd be curious about terrain features related to that. Like, is there even a subtle ridge point that kind of goes up? What does that look like? That change in terrain to me sounds pretty significant. And I would just be investigating that, like if there's an edge around it, if there's a good terrain feature associated with that. I would be kind of interested in how that ends up kind of laying out.
What's this guy's name again?
Jamie.
Jamie, this is a great reason you need to go join our Patreon. Okay, $5 a month. Come hang out. Join us on this next Hunters Hangout meeting. Make sure you're on there at 7:00 p.m. Central Standard Time, and then have like your Onyx or whatever you're using mapping wise, pull it up on your phone, and we'll actually look at this together with everybody on there, kind of breaking it down so we can get a visual representation of what the property, how the property lays out. So that would be awesome to do. And again, another great reason to join Patreon and be a part of these hunter hangout meetings, because we do that all the time. Like I know we have at least 2 Patreon members that have properties they want us to all look at this coming Thursday's meeting. So feel free, Jamie, come join and hop on and show yours too. We can kind of break it down. We do it mostly for private land guys. It's kind of what we like to focus on. But we've had some great discussions specifically around some of those topics and breaking down some of those properties.
Yeah, definitely. All right, that's all we got, man. Those 3.
Sweet. Appreciate everybody listening to the podcast, watching the podcast, and also we got a review we got to read, Andrew.
Okay.
I haven't read a couple of reviews in a little bit, so appreciate everybody's been leaving us 5-star written reviews on Apple Podcasts. It's the only place you can leave a written review. Spotify, you can leave a 5-star review. You just can't do a written review. So real quick, this is one that came from about a week ago from 69 Punch 1023. Title is "Thanks for an awesome podcast, 5 stars. Hi guys, just started listening to your podcast on YouTube last week. I started hunting last year and harvested my first deer with a bow late season and 2 does following that kill. I've learned so much from every episode and can't wait to continue to learn and turn a listener success story of my own in. 30 days until the season here in Missouri. Got 2 nice deer on the farm, hoping to put all the info to work. Follow you on Apple so I can hear all the episodes and maybe get a sticker pack.
Oh,
so
yeah, we got to order more stickers. We're completely out of stickers
we'll
right
get
now.
We'll get some more stickers out. But yeah, appreciate you listening to Apple Podcasts. Again, we bring that up all the time on the podcast, especially because there's so many of you guys watching it on the YouTube. We only started the YouTube video podcast. I think it was episode 486 was the very first video podcast. All the other episodes before that, and there are some classics, some really, really good episodes. You can only find those on like Apple Podcasts or Spotify or iHeartRadio. So, again, if you're watching the podcast and you've been hearing us mention like episode 290 with Richard Fott, Calling Deer the Right Way, absolute classic episode. It will tremendously help you call in deer and give you more confidence doing so. You can only find that on the audio platform. So go check it out, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and just start scrolling back through and you'll find some really good ones.
Yeah, definitely. All right, this one is from Yanks12354. He said, really enjoy the pod, 5 stars. 2 things. Find a flatland/swamp hunter, please. And then also, it'll be a little different from the usual content, but I think a hunting club disaster story would be fantastic. Rick.
Sounds like some drama.
I think that would be interesting. Hunting club disaster stories. I bet we got some people in the audience that have some humdinger stories.
We could do a little episode on that.
Write in your absolute hunting club disaster stories. I'm very curious to hear what we got here.
Send it to the info@thesouthernoutdoorsman.com. Our email address again, info@thesouthernoutdoorsman.com.
Yep.
And make the subject title Hunting Club Disaster.
Yes.
And we'll
please
try.
Do.
If we find some that are pretty good stories, we'll pick it and do a little episode on it. It'd be fun.
Yeah, and Rick, hopefully you caught the episode with Lance Smathers last week. That's definitely a flatland/swamp episode. And a little bit later this fall, we got guys that kind of cycle through who hunt that kind of terrain. But later this fall, we're going to be interviewing a bunch of guys who hunt that. So Mississippi, Louisiana, your time's coming.
Yep, absolutely. So anyways, other than that, guys, appreciate you listening to this podcast, watching this episode, and appreciate everybody that's been buying the apparel. So again, make sure you're subscribed to our newsletter so you can get all the new notifications on the new apparel drops in the next couple of weeks. So again, thank y'all for watching. Thank y'all for listening. We'll catch you back here on the next episode from the Southern Outdoorsman podcast. And remember, guys, y'all stay Southern.